morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the SET panel this morning. Today, we will have the opportunity to hear from individuals who are representatives from other higher education institutions and who have been through a service enhancement very similar to SET. These are individuals who are doing the same work that you will be doing and who have gone through the same experiences. More specifically, you'll learn about their challenges and successes since transitioning into their new model, what their expression of interest process was like, their concerns along the way, and how things have changed in their careers since go live, what the transition was like for them, what they are excited for and what they've done professionally since they went live, what their continuing training and learning process was like after go live, and much, much more. And as we mentioned in the event information, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. If I could please have the slide that shows instructions for upvoting on the screen. When using the Q&A portion of Zoom, if you see a question you like to hear asked, be sure to click the thumbs up icon to upvote the question. You'll know that it worked when the icon turns blue, and more upvotes means the better likelihood the question will get asked. We'll put that screen before we ask, we'll put that slide back up before we ask the Q&A as a reminder. If we could go to the next slide, please. We are very fortunate to have 4 panelists from 3 different institutions. In the interest of making the most of their very valuable time, we request that you keep the questions directed toward learning about their experiences with the service enhancement. Of course, we will answer questions specific to UCF and our SET model in the chat. You can also email nightvision@ucf.edu, as well as go to the SET web pages for the most up-to-date information. But without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. You can see the information on the screen, but I will go ahead and ask to stop sharing so we can hear from them directly. We're going to go ahead and start with Tammy. Tammy, please share with us the institution you're from, your current and previous title, and also how you would describe your institution's new model and your position within that model.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the panel discussion. My name is Tammy Long. I'm from Iowa State University. My current position is a procurement and expense specialist. My previous position was a secretary in the computer science department. I was the main point person in that department and did everything for that department. The new model that we went into is more streamlined and more consistent university-wide. So everybody's doing the same exact thing in that position. So it's a much more streamlined, more efficient program.
Thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome.
If you'll please share the same information.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for including me. My name is Davitsia Long. I'm from Penn State University, and I've worked at Penn State for about 20 years now in human resources. We went through a service delivery model transformation and implementation of Workday back in 2017. So I'm hopeful that my experience, both at that time and then through in these recent years, will be helpful to you. I'm currently the labor relations strategist in human resources. So I focus on our unionized employees. Prior to the transformation, I was the manager of employee relations. I was a people manager. And I'm sorry, Kelly, I'm forgetting what other questions you had for me.
No, you're good. Share with us how you would describe your institution's new model and your position within that model.
Okay. So we transitioned from a decentralized HR model to a centralized HR model. I currently work in our center of expertise, again, focused on labor relations, which means I focus mostly on our unionized employees and their relationship with them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Davitsia.
Thank you.
Jenny, if you'll please share the same information.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jenny Winter, and I am a finance manager at Iowa State University. And just a little bit about our model. So our model is we now refer it to our finance service delivery model. It's comprised of teams of specialists who support various colleges and units across the institution by providing services such as procurement of goods and services, expense reimbursements, finance management, reporting, and post-award support. So each of our team consists of 3 different types of specialists: procurement and expense, which is Tammy Long, and we have finance specialists and grants finance specialists. Those teams are different sizes depending upon the size of the college and the workload that's coming in. So the sizes of those teams are different. Each of those teams of specialists, they report to a team supervisor whose primary role is just to make sure that they are a liaison between myself and the specialist, so that they've got a point person when they're having trouble, that we can escalate their questions. We can help them just really get the resources that they need. So my role as a finance manager, I support a group of team supervisors, 5 team supervisors, and my role is to be that liaison from what's happening at the specialist level with the colleges, so that we've got a connection on things that we need to change, and really just I'm really kind of the communicator between those 2 different groups. And we also have an operational team that is responsible for training on a monthly basis. They do training with our specialists so that we're up to speed on all of the things that have changed over, from week to week. We just changed that to going monthly. And their role is also then to be the liaison between our central offices like procurement, controller's office, and sponsor programming. So we really work to have some liaisons so communication is strong. Prior to 2019, my title was, I was a fiscal coordinator for material science and engineering. And I had just started in September of 2018. So I didn't have, we relocated from Wyoming. And so I didn't have a whole lot of history and background with Iowa State. And so when we started this process with the interest survey, we had our leadership positions. We actually posted those internally. And so I applied for the finance manager position, and we kicked off our implementation in July of 2019. My title remains the same today. The only change I think that we added was that team supervisor, because prior to that I was supervising 45 people, and that just wasn't working. So I'm excited to be here and answer any questions as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And Deb, it's your turn. If you'll share with us your current and previous role, and then describe what the new model is like with your institution.
I'm so sorry, my picture didn't want to stay for some reason.
You're okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deb Miller from The Ohio State University, and I've been in HR there for about 20 and a half years. And my current title is Talent Acquisition Manager. My previous title was Associate Director of HR for the Office of Student Life. And our new model is absolutely wonderful, is that the leadership and the centers of expertise pretty much are the same today as what they were before the transition. Just a few changes, but the big change was really in the service centers. Ohio State had 11 different service centers. So out in the units and colleges, there was and still is unit HR, where there's an HR business partner and HR consultants, but everyone had their own service center. So the transition was to create one service center, and our new branding for that is HR Connection. And within that service center, then there are 4 different areas. We have customer service, which is a call center, tier 1. And we then have a tier 2, which is our employee admin coordinators. And so that's where the calls become escalated to them, but they also process all of the transactions except for the hires. So terminations, academic appointments, personal data changes. And then we also have what's called total rewards, which is, besides doing all of the benefit processing, they do employment verification leave management and so forth. And the fourth area then is talent services, which is all about hires, everything from start to finish and processing and supporting the recruiters in that across campus. And again, my title changed. As I said, I am the manager over the talent acquisition manager over that talent services team. But I also had an interim title. And I have to say it was the highlight of my career when our senior vice president tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I would be the interim director in standing up that service center. So for over a year, while we were planning and creating what everything would look like and the processes, is that I got to be a part of that in oversight and business decisions. And then after we stood up the service center, shortly after that, I moved into my current position, which is all about hiring. So I think that explains our new model.
Thank you so much, Deb. Now it is my pleasure to hand it over to our project partners with Huron. Huron has been instrumental throughout the process for SET. Susan, I'm going to go ahead and toss it to you to introduce yourself and start asking those questions to our panel.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. It's so awesome to see so many of our UCF colleagues and partners listening in. I'm Susan Basso. I'm a principal with Huron, currently partnering with the change management team on the service enhancement transformation at UCF. But prior to joining Huron, I worked in higher ed for over 30 years and most recently led the Workday implementations and service delivery transformations at Penn State and Ohio State that you've heard a little bit about already. I'm delighted this morning to co-facilitate today's panel discussion with my Huron colleague, who I'll now let introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Luke Taylor. I'm a director in our organizational transformation group with Huron Consulting. I suppose my background, like Susan, I consider myself sort of a higher education lifer, and a lot of that time has been defined by change. I've got 20 years in higher education, and I'm pretty sure I know where the next 10 to 15 are going to be coming from. So I spent the first 11 years at the University of Colorado as an employee and as a leader. We experienced quite a lot of change, implementations of systems a number of times during my career there. And as switching over to consulting and coming from that higher education background, I've spent significant time in sort of implementation activities. So the big one being at Iowa State, where I flew out to the icy cold plains of Iowa for about a year and a half, helping them implement the service delivery model that we put in place there. I think you probably heard from them. All of these models are ever so slightly different than what we're talking about here at UCF, so keep that in mind as you sort of listen to some of these answers and some of the questions that we throw at people. But Susan, I'll pass it back to you to get us going.
Thanks so much, Luke. If I could ask all of our four panelists to please come on camera. And I don't know about you, Luke, but one of the things I've absolutely loved about working in higher ed is just this tremendous spirit of collegiality and the willingness of colleagues to share experiences. So with that as a backdrop, since you have all traveled this road, we'd really like to start by asking each of you to just answer a few questions, but we'll throw this first one out to all of you. To really ask you to describe in just a few words, what is an average day for you? What did that look like prior to the transition? And compare that to what it might look like now. And I'll go to Jenny first, and then Tammy, and then Deb, and then Davizia. Jenny?
Great, thank you. So an average day, I would say we'll focus on. I'm watching kind of the questions come in, and it's really interesting because all of the emotions and all of the feelings that I'm seeing those all again, And so prior to our model, as we embarked upon the interest survey, a lot of our time, a lot of my time was really spent on looking at the interest survey and determining, who was interested, what department were they in. And we spent a lot of time initially from about, early January. So again, this kind of the same time frame, early January to March, really identifying who wanted to come into the model. And it was a new concept for everybody. So there was a lot of angst. So it was a lot of one-on-one conversations, a lot of explanation about what our vision was for finance service delivery. And at the time we were called improved service delivery. And so we spent a lot of time just really talking about what our vision was, because we were unknown leaders to the majority of the folks coming in. And so that's, I think, how I would, what the day-to-day looked like before. Now today, obviously we're 2.5 years in, and not to say that we have all of the answers by any means. We don't. We still have our struggles. We still have our frustrations of things that, we know that can be better. But for the most part, we are a well-oiled ship. We just, we know what we need to get done on a given day. We work really hard to define what those roles are and help to educate the campus community on what those roles and responsibilities are of our specialists and how we can help them and be of a service to them.
Thanks, Jenny. Tammy? Tammy, you're on mute.
People see my voice, my mouth moving, but don't hear anything. Before Workday and the finance service delivery, my day started with 7 deep at my desk, waiting for me to clock in so I can attend to them and what needed to happen. On top of everything else that I had to do throughout the day. So being the point person in that department, it was pretty stressful on a day-to-day basis. For me, the transition into the finance service delivery was kind of a breath of fresh air. At the time this was taking place, I had been the department secretary for 29 years, and I contemplated retirement. But I wasn't ready to retire. So I weighed the pros and cons of transitioning in, and I wasn't out anything if it just wasn't for me. So Jenny contacted me. We had a meeting, and the transition happened. And I'm still at Iowa State. I have not retired. I'm going on my 31st year. And I don't have any plans of retiring anytime soon. Workday and finance delivery is the best job that I have had at Iowa State in my total career. So that's where I'm at with that one.
Thank you. Deb?
I had a little problems with the buttons there this morning. As I said, prior to the transition, I was the assistant director of HR and student life. And I think I can simply sum it up by saying you are all things to all people. Kind of like Tammy, I had a line at my door. It was kind of a running joke before I could even get there. And I was usually there before many other people. So, the service center processed everything. And the terms, the transfers, hires, data changes, answered every kind of question under the sun, so to speak. You had walk-ins, phone calls. I was heavily involved in the annual merit process for student life, and student life has 40 different departments with 40 different agendas. So the difference today is amazing because being the manager over talent services, I get to focus on my love. And that was, streamlining the hiring process. And as Tammy and Jenny have said, Workday makes it really easy to do that. You're not doing data entry. Workday automatically will process the hire and reads the information from the resume and the application. But the other major difference is the reports and the metrics that we have today. So in student life, I was constantly trying to figure out how to get that information out of PeopleSoft. And with Workday, and we also brought up in the transition, the case management system ServiceNow. We have a whole lot of data, from ServiceNow as well. So it's also possible to see the work ahead of what's coming in. So, before we were on paper or DocuSign. So, it's just so much easier to measure everything, to streamline processes. We were doing a lot of manual work on paper, which no longer, exist in Workday, and work around shadow systems. So it's so much easier, a lot more accurate. And like I said, now, a lot of that noise, so to speak, is no longer part of my world. And I can really focus on making the hiring process the best that it can be for the university.
Thanks, Deb. Davizia?
Okay, so prior to transformation, I was the manager of employee relations. I'd been in that role since about 2011, and I think I mentioned that we transitioned in 2017. So a typical day for me and my team was we would handle, a wide range of issues, from a very basic question, what is a holiday, when is the holiday, to handling a performance management issue, to also trying to develop policy and, prepare for contract negotiations and things like that. So there was just a lot, and it was hard to set priorities. It was hard to have time to, just focus on more complex projects like policy development and, complex labor negotiations issues. So in my current role as labor relations strategist, I have that think time, right? I can plan and focus more on the bigger picture as far as our contract negotiations, which is a big part of my role now. We also have a policy strategist who focuses on policy development. And, we have tier 2 support that helps with the performance management issues. And then we have shared services that can help with those routine and basic questions that often took, a lot of our time and distracted from being able to contribute in other ways.
Thanks. Luke, to you.
Yeah, so all of you have gone through a major transformation, just like UCF is right in the middle of. And I think we would love to hear from each of you what worked really well, and then, what were some of the challenges. And I guess I would encourage you to, don't hold back on some of it, because I know it can sometimes be challenging. So Jenny, I'll start with you.
Great. Yes. So I'll start with, what worked well in our transition. So we really, like I said before, we really invested a good amount of time working through those interest surveys. So that's super important from a leadership perspective. Spend a lot of time, listening to what the employees are looking for in their role. Our focus was for employees to feel comfortable about transitioning into the model. And that took a lot of time and patience on our part from a leadership perspective. Not to say that it's the way to do it, but I personally called and visited with each person, sharing my vision as a leader. Like I said, I was new and so was this new model. And so wanted to share what our vision for the team was and try to help them understand a little bit about what they would be joining and what those expectations would look like. And then once the employee accepted the position, I then went out and met with them and their current existing supervisor at the time to walk through what that transition process was, to determine things like, office space was a question where, do they stay in the office, or are you going to find them a new home? And we had a mix of that across campus. Some people wanted their person to stay in the department. Some wanted to stay. Some thought, I really need to break away from the department. So we really tried to work and find what was the best the best solution for both people. Talking a lot about equipment. Are they taking their computer with them? What about their phone number? Kind of just all of those little details. And so, that is what worked well for us, is that we really at the front end worked with those current existing supervisors to make sure we had all of that lined out. The biggest challenge that we faced, and to be honest, we still face this and we work on it on a daily basis, is there was a huge fear that the departments are losing their person, right? We joked, and I've got lots of little ad libs that I'll add in. The common statement made by Iowa State was, I'm losing my person. I want to walk down the hall and I want to push their belly button, and I don't have the belly button to push anymore. And so we really had to work on that, what our image and what we tried to portray to them was, you still can walk down the hallway. You're instead of taking a right, now you're going to take a left. That person is still there to help support you. And so we really wanted to build and to maintain that relationship over that transition. And so that's, I think, what our biggest challenge has been, is trying to help communicate that it's still the same employees that have worked at Iowa State for years and years and years, providing that same service to you. It's just that they're in a different model under different leadership, but the message and the care and the support and the customer service is still important to Iowa State. And so it just looks a little different from an org chart perspective.
Thanks, Jenny. Tammy, from your perspective, what were some of the, what worked well and what were some of the challenges? Tammy, it wouldn't be a Zoom call if the mute wasn't an issue.
I'm so sorry. Jeez.
It's going to happen.
What worked well for me before the transition was each specialist area met for 2 to 3 weeks before we transitioned for training. That was very helpful. We got job aids for processes through the Workday system, and we were all together. We were able to ask each other questions, help each other through processes. Very beneficial. One thing, and we still do this, is we meet with our assistant finance manager every other week, and we do meetings, and we get follow-ups, changes to policy. That's very helpful. One thing that I did in the beginning of the transition, like Jenny said, to piggyback off her, my faculty were very worried that I wouldn't be there for them, as I had been for so many years. I attended faculty meetings in the beginning to reassure them that I was still there for them, not for everything they needed me for before the transition, but for a lot of the stuff after the transition, I was still there for them to meet their needs and make sure that it got done. And I did that with 3 other departments that I am the specialist for. I attended their faculty meetings and answered any questions, and just reassured them that I haven't bailed on them. I'm just in a different capacity, different role. So the communication part of it with my faculty and my staff really helped a lot with transitioning them along with me with the transition. So.
Gotcha. Thanks, Tammy. Deb, how about for you?
I have a couple of similar things to Jenny, is that, we did quite a bit online, being remote. We did a lot of activities and training with the employees, using Zoom and Teams. We spent a lot of time making sure that the service center, everyone in the service center understood the structure. We had speakers from the centers of expertise so that they knew the model, knew where to go, knew where to escalate things. And so felt that, the employees were very well educated and very comfortable, with the new structure, with their new team. I too, had meetings with each employee, talked about their new role, their job description, the expectations, and so forth. So all of that went very well. Again, we had, customers units and colleges that were kind of pushing the panic button a little bit on what am I going to do now that my service center is no longer sitting there. So, and actually, again, that went very well. They learned very quickly about the new call center, about the case management tool ServiceNow, and that they could go in and find knowledge. If they had a question at 3:00 in the morning, they could go in and look for the answer within the ServiceNow system and so forth, instead of, again, walking down the hall and coming into the Student Life Service Center. So I felt that all of that transferred very well. The one area that was a challenge, and hearing Jenny talk about this, is maybe we did not do enough interaction with the managers of the units and colleges that the employees were coming from. So our actual go live date with the service center was June 21st of 2020. And even though our employees had attended their meetings in the service center, their training, they were geared up and ready to go, what we found is that there was actually work that had been shifted from the HRBPs or the HRCs that was being done in the service center that really should and needed to stay within the units and colleges. And so we found September and even into October that we were kind of bargaining a little bit with some of the units, like, well, I really need them to still finish this bit of work or whatever. And so it's like, you can have them 2 days a week. We still need them 3. So we had some trailers, so to speak, that we needed to bargain with to get them to come into the service center. So that was a challenge.
Gotcha. Thanks, Deb. Davitya, from your perspective?
Yep. So, our experience was very similar to what everyone else has talked about here. We had units that wanted to keep their people and were worried about their people being gone. We did, extensive training and communication and job aids for folks. There was some logistical issues during, actual implementation where things, stayed as they were for a little bit in some areas. So that's all true for us, but I want to take a little different tact with the question too, just talk about like my experience and those I worked with just personally. So the things that worked well, I think for us is, we had all worked together for a while, even those that had, newly hired to those that had been there for over 30, 40 years. I think my director at the time had been with the university for 40 years. And, we supported each other, and that was true, across units too. We talked and we were frank with each other. We had excellent communication coming from leadership and the transition teams and, the Workday implementation partners and, all of that structure was in place. So that there was a lot of good information. But what worked really well is that we were able to have frank discussions amongst ourselves because frankly, we were all nervous. This was a huge, huge change. We thought we knew what to expect, but you don't really know what to expect until it happens, right? So that was very helpful, just the support among each other. Some of the challenges, there were folks, we were all at different stages in change acceptance, right? So, we had to spend some time talking that through. We had to give, each other time to be able to get used to the change, accept the change, and then figure out, where do I want to be in this new world? And then I think another challenge was role clarity. Like, okay, we all knew what our jobs were pre-transformation, but post-transformation, we had an idea. We had job descriptions and an org chart and a plan. But then just actually implementing that, did all those roles make sense as written? And then just being really open, over the past couple of years of this is working really well. This isn't. We need to tweak, and just the constant modification, because it's not that transformation or transition happens and you're done, right? You continue to learn and grow within the new model.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Davita.
Great. So I think in the spirit of time, we're going to move on to some more specific targeted questions. So Luke, I'll let you ask the first one of Davizia.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things people are curious about is career paths, and maybe you could speak a little bit about yours.
Yep, I'd be happy to. So as I mentioned, I was a manager. So I managed a staff of about 10 employees. And that was the way prior to the transition to, grow and contribute at a high level. And then we had this, through transformation, introduced this concept of the center of expertise and the strategist roles. And, it really caused me to stop and think, what is it that I want to be doing? I knew I wanted to stay with Penn State. And I knew that at least, my career was going to be with Penn State, but the idea of not being a manager was intriguing to me. The idea of being able to really focus at a high level on projects and not just have them be and also we need to get this done as soon as we have time. So it gave me the opportunity to kind of shift a little bit in my career. So I'm no longer a people manager. I'm instead, focused on high level projects. But I also get to work closely with a lot of the same people that I worked with before, or the same roles. So yeah, but it caused, it was an opportunity to stop and think. And it was the same thing for those that worked for me at the time. It was an opportunity to stop and think and say, well, what is it that I want to do? It was a time for a lot of us to make some shifts in our career while staying with the same organization in the same field.
Yeah. Thank you, Davita.
Thanks, Davizia. Deb, this next question is for you. As you recall, and as many of our UCF colleagues are experiencing, these kinds of transitions can provoke a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry about job loss. And it always seems like no matter how many times a leader says there's a role for you, there's opportunity for you if you perform well, it never lands, understandably. And so I just wanted to ask you, in your experience at a large, complex institution going through pretty significant change, it was a huge HR organization. Did anyone lose their job as a result of the transition, and what might you say about that? You're on mute.
I'm telling you, we do this every day, right? And I don't know why it's so much harder here to remember to take it off. The short answer is no one lost their job, but as you referred to, our HR leadership team, consistently reminded and had that, if you want to call it a mantra, that no one would lose their jobs. And I think that leadership did a great job with this. We had a number of town halls that talked about what the transition looked like, why we were doing the transition, why this made sense. And really, as senior vice president, said this is not about downsizing, it's about right sizing. And I think that helped many of the employees to understand, along with all of the other information that they received in regards to the transition and the structure and so forth. The other thing that I felt was combined with this, and again, we talked about it in town halls with all of the HR employees, is that career pathing was very difficult at Ohio State. And again, going back to my earlier comments of having, 11 different service centers and every unit in college having their own HR sitting there, is that, the titles, not the same titles were used. The colleges and units were free to decide how many HR folks they thought they needed. And so, becoming that one HR during this transition then really gave leadership the opportunity to look and see how many people do we need, where do they need to be, and what should their title and job descriptions be. So I think it's really important that this was combined with great thought about career paths for employees and what the titles and job descriptions would be as well.
Great.
And then I think there's a second part to this in regards to the number of individuals. And I knew this would be probably a topic of conversation. And, as the interim director, I sat in the room where we made the decisions. So I believe the employees had 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks to decide what their top 3 choices would be. They were given the new titles, the new job descriptions. I know that many reached out for help in their decision. And it was difficult. We met for at least 3 weeks every day. I met with the leadership team to take a look at what the requests were and, to make the best matches that we possibly could. And so approximately 475 HR employees, is that 65% was able to get their very first choice. And 85% total, 85% got one of their 3 choices. So, that 15% was then looked at as to where, they could best be placed. And in most cases, it was within the shared service center in customer service, as well as talent services and so forth. And as the interim director, then I really considered it. It may sound strange to say it's a privilege, but I looked at it as a privilege to talk to those individuals and talk about their choices and the decisions that had been made as far as placements. And of course, they were difficult decisions. There was tears or anger. But as we talked through and had conversation and things kind of evened out and they started thinking about it calmly, is that, I asked them to share with me why they made the choices that they did, because in most cases, they had really done, stretch goals, so to speak, on positions that they weren't anywhere nearly qualified for. And they really loaded up maybe their first or second selection with a position where there was only 1 or 2 FTE in those positions. And the individuals that were in them, of course, many selected to stay in those positions. And once we got through that conversation of why they selected what they did, is then we talked more about career pathing. and it turned into a really good conversation about how can we get you where you want to be. And I think that, of course, not everyone is totally 100% happy, but by far the vast majority of our employees were granted one of their choices or was ready to move on and do what they needed to do to get to that position.
Thanks, Deb. One thing I can speak to too, as part of being of ISU, is no one lost their job there either. As a result of this transformation, it was a big shuffling and realignment of responsibilities, just like we're talking about here at UCF. But Tammy, I'd like to ask you the next question of what it felt like to go through this expression of interest process. I think you're probably closest to what a lot of people are feeling right now. And I'd love to hear from you, just like remembering what that felt like and sort of the outcome of it.
Sure. You know, like I said, I was a department secretary for many, many years. I felt like I needed a change. I needed to make some decisions. And this, Iowa State held and I don't think I'm getting the name right, but basically what it was kind of like a career fair prior to the Workday transition. And at this, they held, it's hard for me to explain. It was like a career fair. They explained each position within the specialist's position. And that helped a lot with making my decision. I had to do a lot of pros and cons prior. It was very stressful for me. Change is something that people just don't like. And it was a huge change for me. When I started with the university, I didn't have a computer. I had a typewriter and everything was done on a typewriter. Then I got a computer and that was a change that I didn't like. And then everything financially was done in ledgers and carbon paper. And so I made a full, it's just been, it's been good. Workday's been good, but the transition was stressful. Trying to decide if this was the right fit, how that was going to look in my career path. But I really think I made the right choice.
Great. So now, we're more than a little bit through the halfway point, and we really want to focus on some of the questions in the chat. So I'm going to ask our UCF colleagues, Chuck and Sarasa, to come on. And I'm just going to actually pitch the initial question while they're getting ready to Jenny, because there seems to be some questions around, what it's like now having no finance individuals at the department level, and how do your departments actually keep track of their budget expenditures?
Ooh, that's a great question. So it's sort of a loaded question, right? So if you ask me, and I would say probably our Iowa State leadership, the centralized model is wonderful from a finance perspective. So why I think it's wonderful is because we had probably 200 different ways of doing things prior to coming into the centralized model. Now we've got subsets of people who consistently do those jobs day in, day out. And so they know what they're looking for. And that's not to say that we have for Tammy, for example, it's not to say that Tammy sits at her desks and she processes travel reimbursements all day. There's still variety in the work that they do in that specialist role. But what it does allow is that you don't have to remember. If you do something once every 6 months, you don't have to remember how to do that anymore, because we have a specialized team that does that on a consistent basis. So the centralized model really streamlined it really streamlined our processes. The loaded part of that question is we still have some pushback on folks not wanting to give that, to rely on us for financial reporting, for example. We recently just did a huge push we called it our faculty reporting seminar, where we developed, and this probably is getting way too much into the weeds of Workday, but essentially what we did is we built some workbooks for our faculty members and for our business unit managers that would consolidate all of the information into one particular area so that they only had to look at one space to find their financial information. Now, for our financial folks, our business unit managers, and those in higher financial roles, if you will, they still have that ability to run those reports. We just become the experts on helping them navigate what those reports look like. So again, not to say that, everybody wants to use our services, but we really have made a push to that those are the services that we provide, and they're consistent across the board for all of those financial leaders.
Thank you. Maybe following up on that, the finance question, maybe because you and Tammy are both in the finance space, how do you support the central finance department employees for advancement or to make sure that their days do not become static? And we've had a number of questions around this issue of people doing the same routine things over and over again. How do they stay engaged and excited about the work that they're doing?
That's great. I'll take that one, Tammy, first, and then you can kind of speak to it from your specific role. What I can tell you is that even though the topic itself may be remote or maybe the same every single day, every transaction that comes into us is different. And so there is not, we just don't have that stagnant of processing the same thing over and over and over. Everything is different each and every single time in each and every transaction. And so, I don't know how to answer that other than to say it just doesn't happen that way, that the transactions come in the exact same. I mean, yes, you do a travel reimbursement for an individual, but where they traveled and how they traveled and what allowability and appropriateness, it's always changing depending upon that transaction. So I think some days, honestly, our specialists would like to have a little bit more consistency. And I think one of the things that supports that is this continued training. We've had continued training since July 1st, every week for an hour for all of our specialist roles. And we've never canceled. We've always had an hour's worth of content that we need to cover on the things that have changed. And so it's just revolving. It's just always changing. So Tammy, maybe speak a little bit from a procurement and expense specialist, how you're not just stuck in this same thing every single time.
Sure. You're going to have weird things crop up every day. Nothing is going to be the same. You might be doing supplier invoices. You might be doing travel expense. I do a lot of foreign expense reports. A lot of my faculty travel foreign now. With the COVID, they haven't been doing that much, although it's picking up. So I do a lot of travel. I also have worked and helped with every college in the university. So I get a variety there. Sometimes it's requisitions for purchase, supplier invoices. There might be a day when I'm bombarded with expense reports. The next day it might be, okay, well, I've got a lot of email questions here that I need to research and find the answers for. So it's a variety of different things throughout Workday. You're not always doing the same thing, although it might seem like you are. It's kind of hard to explain because it's the same, but it's different.
Thanks, Tammy.
Uh-huh.
Appreciate Saressa and Chuck being on. And as you look through some of the questions, what might be some of the things that stand out for you that you in particular would like any of our panelists to address?
Sure. The first one that's been given to me is how did faculty and administrative level employees respond to moving to the SET model? Our faculty admins are used to having staff in the departments that they deal with individually. So I wonder how your experience was with this facet of the reorganization. I think, Tammy, you talked about it a little bit and how you address that. Maybe you want to expand upon that and others could chime in as well.
Sure. Well, there was a lot of worry and questions when I decided to transition into the Workday model. Like I said, I was the point person in our department. And I reassured them that that was not going to change. I was still their support. And I've always left with my faculty and all my departments that I work for. I always communicate, any communication back and forth. I have a really good relationship with my faculty and staff. And I think the key to that is to, they have to trust you and they have to have confidence in you that you will be able to keep supporting them, even though you're not directly in the office at their fingertips, but they know that you're only a phone call away or a text away. So I keep my faculty, I've got a really good relationship with my faculty. They all know they can depend on me to get what their needs met. Even though I'm not physically there, they know that they can depend on me. And for me, that's important. That's very important for me.
And Saressa, I can jump in a little bit on to give some honest reactions that I encountered. It's not all sunshine and roses and not everybody is supportive. I had folks that elected to, in the interest survey, say, yep, I'm going to go into the model. And I had that supervisor call me the next day and said, I don't want them in my department anymore. They're yours. And this is end of January and our go live's not till July. So now I've got to, and they just wanted to wash their hands of them. They were very angry that folks were considering leaving the department that they had been in for a number of years. And so there was a lot of animosity in some areas across the college, and we just had to take those, kind of one-on-one and handle those and help those employees work through that that process. So it really kind of just depended on their experience, and we just had to welcome them with open arms and and help them through that through that process. So it was definitely high anxiety. Lots of questions, lots of unknowns. And so you just try and answer the questions as they best that they could. And, I see a lot of questions in there just about how do they know who supports them? We spent a lot of time on that communication, both on our websites, developing charts based off of, if this was your college, this is your department. These are the core people that support you, so that they could still identify who those people were that would help support them. So we did a lot of external communication and building of websites and documents and PDFs and, the who does what document and who's my person document. And all of those would get disseminated out. But even still today, 2.5 years in, we still hear, I don't know who is my procurement person to help me purchase something. So we just have to continue to work through those and reach out to those people to get to department faculty meetings, to introduce ourselves, to get involved in those meetings so that people know who we are. But we still face that today.
Fantastic. Thank you. Chuck, do you want to take the next one?
Certainly. I want to start with Deb on this question, if I can. Are your centralized positions remote work from home, or are they on campus?
So great question. We were remote when we went live, and by far they are still remote. some of the units and colleges, the HRBPs, business partners, and the HR consultants are rotating in and out of the office. So there's someone there at least every day. And in the service center, everyone was gone for a good portion of the time. And we just started this past September, bringing back a couple of the teams, the background check team and I-9 team, and bringing them back into the office as a full team. We're still very much under mask mandates and so forth in Ohio. So, but it has been fun to bring them into the office so that they actually get to see each other face to face for the first time. But still the majority are remote, with just a couple of teams within the office.
All right, well, thank you, Deb. I'd like to comment a little bit on where we may be going with UCF. Right now, we still have a number of employees that work a substantial portion of their time remotely in their current positions. And as we move to a new model, the set model, a lot is going to depend on the supervisors and the leadership in the business centers. You know, what makes the most sense for the employees to be on campus or working remotely. So I think a lot of what's going to happen over the next few months is going to be determined by who's in the leadership positions, what are the interests of the employees, and how do we make this all work. Deb, from your perspective, did all the work get done just fine and on time?
For me, yes. Yes, we have not missed a heartbeat. So the work is all getting done and very much on time.
Well, that's super. And I think that's certainly been the case with the incredible employees we have at UCF. Nobody's missed a beat over the last 2 years when we've certainly had some trying conditions. Well, thank you very much, Deb. Sarasa, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. Just to kind of expand upon this a little bit more. Doing the same thing every day. But the first part of this question is, has there been a lot of turnover in the positions in the service centers once the positions became so focused? I think this goes back to the concern about, doing travel all day seems, not very exciting. And did that lead to people to, leaving those positions?
Excuse me, is that for me?
Actually, if maybe Tammy and Jenny want to take that one on again, since this focuses on travel, just so we can have a little bit more conversation about the variety associated with it.
Sure, I'll jump in, and then Tammy certainly go for it. One of the things that we're really proud of is that we have the same leadership structure and same leadership team that we had since July of 2019. So we're really proud of that. Part of a significant amount of that is just from my leader and my supervisor. So that core group has remained the same. We have experienced turnover at the specialist level. For a variety of reasons. So one reason is yes, they have come in, they came into the model, they gave it a year to a year and a half, and it just wasn't for them. They didn't, and some of that is with remote work. We are completely remote right now. And so in some cases they've said, you know what, that just wasn't for me. I want that in-person interaction. And so I'm going to go back to this role on campus. We have lost folks, like I said, because the work of the model is just not what they thought it was going to be. But we have also seen tremendous growth with career path expanding into other departments within the college. So we've had specialists come in, and because they're working specifically with procurement, for example, as a procurement and expense specialist, they really like that role and they like that work. And then they went to join the procurement department as a buying agent or, some other specific role in that department because they had that exposure within that role. So I would say we've had more of that from a turnover perspective, that they just have experienced something in their finance service delivery position that has expanded that to other areas and opportunities on campus.
Thank you, Jenny. Tammy, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would just echo what Jenny said. Even though you feel like you're doing the same thing day in and day out, it's so much different each time. I can do travel expense reports all day long, and there might be one that's going to take me 5 minutes. There might be one that's going to take me 3 hours to do because of the complexity and, you know, going by university policy. You're going to have, you're going to have some days you're going to be doing the same thing all day long. There's other days when you're going to be doing 15 different things. So it varies from day to day. Yeah.
Deb, could you chime in a little bit about turnover and if you saw that at Ohio?
Sure. It's very similar to what Jenny was saying, is that many of our specialists have taken advantage of those stepping stones that we put into place. And it's been very interesting that on the talent side, again, they were able to get the workday under their belt, get the process down, and then they were ready to move on and help the recruiter. And so we're actually even looking at maybe a couple of different levels of specialist, where one is at a higher level in doing maybe a lot of the junior recruiter responsibilities. So it really has worked. And of course, some have found, just as Jenny said, some have found it's not for them. So we have lost a few, but it's been fairly small. The other thing I'd like to add about the remote question is, we seriously had some conversations this fall before Omicron got really bad about bringing people back to the office. And it's so interesting because their preference is to work from home. So I think we may have a kind of a different issue when this is over, whether we really do bring everybody back or that we do have certain groups that are working remotely, that has truly become the preference for many. So
thank you. Davizia, can you talk about what the turnover was at Penn State?
Sure, I can. So I don't have as much of a line of sight to our shared services group. So I've been letting Jenny and Tammy and Deb speak to that. But from like the HR consultant lens and those folks that were in the units, I think a couple of things to keep in mind. We've seen movement between colleges in a way that we didn't before. It used to be if you worked in HR and you worked for a given college or a given department, that's where you spent your career and you didn't really think about moving. Some might, but not many. So we've seen more movement that way. We've seen folks be part of the central team and then move out to one of the units. HR as a whole, I think, identifies more as a whole in a group. So there's movement within the group. Did we have folks that just chose to leave HR or just chose to leave Penn State? Yes, of course we did. But we did before the transformation too, even before the transformation was an idea, right? There's always a healthy amount of turnover, within an organization, and folks are at different points in their life and different goals for their careers. And so that kind of change happens. And we also had folks, Tammy spoke about thinking about retiring, when this happened. We had folks that made that choice too, that, they were at a certain point in their career and they decided that, they didn't want to go through this big change. So that did happen. Did we see significant turnover? No. But yes, some folks did choose to make changes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chuck, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm wondering how at your institutions you've combated employees who no longer have a vested interest in their old college or department since they don't work anymore directly in that college or department. At UCF, this has been a bit of an issue with our IT change to a centralized IT services. And many people think the support may not be as good as it used to be. So Deb, any thoughts that you might have on that?
I am not aware of that type of mentality here at Ohio State. I think there, as I said, when we pulled the service centers away, there was some concern, like I'm losing my service center, but I think they have found that HR Connection is much more responsive, that they have more of a direct line to quote unquote the experts. And I don't believe that at least I've not received any feedback that they feel that they are receiving any less support or less interest, from HR Connection. But that's interesting that you mentioned in IT. So I don't know if that's the situation with our IT group or not, but just speaking as a whole in the support from the service center, from especially our call center, of being able to get someone there and be able to get answers, where before they may have had a service center of 4 people and nobody was free to go and get the answer. They're getting that quicker response because there's always someone available, to talk to, that they, can enter a ServiceNow case. And maybe it is a talent acquisition question, but we're responding, very quickly to those as well. So I think they feel that in many cases, they might be getting a faster response.
Can I speak to that? Can I speak to that too?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we had a bit of an IT transition too, and I can just speak to that from the customer perspective. So we had the situation within HR that we had, a couple of key folks that were our IT support, and Joyce. Everybody went to Joyce. Joyce was our person. Well, if Joyce was overwhelmed and wasn't able to help us, then you either needed to wait or you hated to ask Joyce to add something to her plate. So what the experience has been is that, oh yeah, Joyce is still there. She's still a person that we know, but then now we know more folks who are there to support us and to help us. So it's not really, limiting the support that we get. It's actually seeing that our colleague is getting help and is able to help us. And it's the people, right? It's not that strangers answer your call every time. You get to know the new folks. If there's different folks in a role, you get to know them too.
That brings another thought to me, Chuck, is that our office, the Chief Information Officer, actually centralized years ago with a ServiceNow, with a service center and a ServiceNow system as well. So, we do have IT within HR that supports HR, but all of campus is, pretty much serviced by a centralized IT, or they do have, like Student Life that I came from has its own small IT group. So our transition did not really impact IT services other than within HR and our IT group in many ways, but also within that IT group, there are some reporting and different things that they help with throughout campus. And I think the team is even stronger than what it was before the transition.
Excellent. Thank you both very much. Sarasa, back to you.
Yeah, I'll do a little follow-up on that one because I feel like the concern there says they're drawing from the UCF IT experience, past experience, and that they felt as if they lost that personal service touch understanding of that unit because they were moved to centralized positions. So I think we should talk about that a little bit more, but if you could just kind of expand upon how, moving to a service center does not disconnect you from a unit. It's still just as important for them to know everything they need to know about that department's needs to be successful in their new roles.
Are you talking?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did you say Deb? And so are you still saying that in regards to IT or other areas?
Wait, I think people are just pulling from our experience from UCF IT, sort of what our perception that they sort of lost this level of service. And so I think it's just coming up as a concern again as we move towards service enhancement transformation.
Okay.
You could just talk again about how you maintain those connections and people not only specialize in their roles, but it sounds like they also are like the main point of contact for a particular department or unit. So maybe Tammy, you could talk about how many different departments do you serve in your procurement expense position?
In my previous position, I served, 40 different departments within the Office of Student Life. So, and now as a talent acquisition manager, we support all hires for the medical center and the university. So, and again, those 11 service centers were, collapsed into HR Connection. And I think it was difficult. I think that, many of the units and colleges and the medical center certainly had, their way of doing things. And they had a lot of requirements that campus did not have, just simply being a medical center. So we had to learn, all of those steps and verifications that are important for a medical center. And, it was a matter of building trust that, yes, we could do this. And I did have conversations with much of the leadership with the medical center to say, we've got this, no, we did not do these type of verifications, licensing and certifications and special background checks, but we learned how to do it. And I think, sometimes it does take time for them to trust when they hand something over that's that important to folks who normally don't do that type of work. And, I think back to the first month or so that we were processing, and, every now and then there was a mistake made, and I immediately got on the phone and said, we've got it. I want you to know what happened. So I think that, you have to take that extra care. I think, the other panelists have talked about this as well, is that, you just have to really work hard to build that trust, really have your antenna up, so to speak, as to what the issues may be. And if something does go wrong, that you're the first one out front, addressing that. I think about when we went live on Workday, for whatever reason, the recruiters from the medical center who had such a different process from campus really struggled with Workday. Many times they had multiple things all happening, all these certifications and verifications happening in different areas. And now we had collapsed that, right? And so again, we went live last January with Workday, and January and February, I spent a lot of hours on the phone walking people through the process, because it is slick when it works right and when it's used correctly. But, it's really helping people to see it. So it wasn't only leadership. Now that I think about it, I spent a lot of time with the recruiters in helping them to understand how Workday flows and how great it can be when you really understand it. But it's all about building that trust and again, letting your work stand for itself, but being very sensitive to that customer service piece.
Thank you. The next question for Jenny and Tammy. and hopefully you can speak to this, but how did you handle office space limitations? Did employees whose job duties were moved to a centralized model stay in their current offices, or were they moved to common space?
Tammy, I'll take that one. So again, we had everybody from, we had all realms of the spectrum. We had some people that said, some departments that said, great, you're going into the model, you can keep your office space, and keep your equipment, keep your phone. We're happy to just help keep you supporting. We had some that said, nope, take a hike. Sorry, I don't know where you're going to go, and you need to find a home for them. So we had to do a lot of office bargaining across campus to find some folks some homes where they just, they essentially got kicked out. I think over the course of, before we went remote with COVID, I had probably 4 different office spaces because I would be somewhere and then somebody would say, nope, sorry, we're going to give this space to so-and-so, and I would get kicked out. And that happened for our specialists as well. So we had to just be really flexible about trying to find them office spaces. In some cases, we were able to find some space that allowed like 4 procurement and expense specialists to share like a graduate student office is what it was converted from. And so that, at first they didn't like that thought of having to share, one big room with 4 different people, but then they discovered that it was nice to be able to say, hey, I've got this expense report, and bounce ideas off of themselves, just within that room. So we've had to model that we use Microsoft Teams to keep our groups connected in our remote setting so that they can still have that interaction at a moment's notice. But yes, it really kind of just depended upon if the question was asked, can this person stay in their office as currently? And the answer was yes, and the answer was no, and we had to find them a new home.
Thank you. Chuck, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Saressa. I've got a question I'd like to pose to Tammy specifically. Since you were doing everything in the computer science department at Iowa State, when you left to join the service center, what happened in the computer science department? How did they manage this transition?
That's a good question. When I left the computer science department, they hired 2 admin specialists. One was primarily for event planning, and the other one was for departmental services. They also hired an administrative specialist for graduate studies. So when I was in the department, I didn't do graduate studies, but I did everything else. So it took 2 people to replace me when I transitioned into ISD. I still have a great working relationship with computer science. I have great, the staff there are wonderful. So it was a big transition for them. Plus they have hourly students too. So I think they hired 3 new hourly students after I left. I had 1 that would help me. So it was a transition. It was a transition, and I did a lot of discussions with my department chair at the time and with my immediate supervisor to see what that would look like should I transition out. And to be honest, they were supporting me 100% with my decision. So I felt comfortable leaving that and transitioning into Workday in the finance service delivery model. So.
And I guess the computer science department is still operating, right?
They are. They are. Yes, they are.
Excellent. All right, Saressa?
Yeah, I'm actually going to try one more question if we can. We got a few more minutes. How did you handle equity and salary for those that were transitioned to central positions? Does anyone want to chime in on how their institution navigated that?
This is Jenny. I can speak a little bit to it. I obviously didn't have a whole lot of, HR communication. That was obviously handled by our HR department, but by and large, it was a lateral move for our specialist as they came from their existing position into the model. We did have some, because of our merit system and our merit rules, that if they hadn't served in that merit classification, they had to go back through a 90-day evaluation period. And that created a lot of angst, because a lot of people thought, oh, great, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate I could do my job in 90 days and I'm going to get fired. And so we had a lot of conversations about just having patience, and it's a learning process. And, we don't expect you to know that new role in 90 days. So, but by and large, we had lateral movements across the board with their salary. We did have some that were underpaid, and so we had to bump them up into that new classification. But we did not have any demotions or pay docs.
I'll go next and talk a little bit about Ohio State. Is that when the other part of that message of, this is about right sizing, is that nobody was going to take a decrease in their salary. And the main reason for that is because we've had a very long and difficult project going on called Career Roadmap. And as I said, we had all different kinds of titles that were out there that were being used. And the units in colleges, again, some are, as you probably well know, some are wealthier than others that do make money versus, the academic colleges. And so, we held on all of that, and we're now wrapping up that project called Career Roadmap, and we'll be working through how do we equal out the salaries here in the next about 6 months.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I know we've got about 2 minutes left. First of all, I just want to thank you all for joining us here at UCF and answering some questions. I know there's a lot of questions in the Q&A that still need to be answered that we will collect. We may actually send out to some of you if you don't mind continuing some of your responses, and we'll make sure we get that to the campus community. In about 2 sentences, though, I'd love to go around and get your sense. You are on the other side of a major transformation, Workday and service delivery at the same time in a lot of cases. So what do you want the staff at UCF to know about what it looks like on the other side? And Jenny, I'll start with you and have us go around.
All right, sounds good. So I knew that question was coming, and I wrote out my answer, because here's my answer, is I won't sugarcoat it. Your transition is not going to be easy. Any change is hard. You will have times of high stress. You will have times of wondering and asking yourself, what have I done? But at the end of the day, you're going to get through it. You're going to get through this change. You will get to a point where you look back and you say, wow, I'm so glad I was a part of this change and making a difference for UCF. And Luke, to your point, I know we didn't get through all the questions, and I'm looking through those Q&As, and there's so many good ones. I really would be happy to take any additional questions to kind of, take our model and morph it to how it would fit for UCF, and answer those questions. But at the end of the day, you're going to get through it. It's hard, but you will land in a good spot. I promise.
So I'll go ahead and follow
Yeah.
Jenny, if you don't mind, because she kind of took the words out of my mouth. I remember going home at the end of the day, putting my head in my hands and thinking to myself, what did you just do? But I promise, it's not going to take 3 months. It may not take 6 months. It does get better. It really does get better. And I can honestly say, in my 31 tenure at Iowa State University, this is the best job that I've ever had and the most rewarding. So that's my ending on.
Thanks, Tammy. Deb?
I, I think Jenny really said it very well. I think it was the right thing to do. You just have to take each day, be patient with it, celebrate the small wins. And I would just caution about making changes and once you're through it, is just really be cautious about making changes too quickly, because you really need to see it through and see what it looks like. And I say that caution also because of the employees. If you start changing things too quickly, you will lose them. So be patient and celebrate the small wins.
Thanks, Deb. Go for it, Divitya.
Yeah. So I have a clear memory of my first time trying to use Workday. It was a really simple thing I wanted to look up, and I could not remember my training and what to do. And there was that moment of, oh, this is going to be hard. And I just looked to my colleague and who helped me through it. And then, we were able, to do what I needed to do. So I would just say, once you get through it, the consistency and the processes will work well. But in the meantime, be patient with yourselves and be patient with your colleagues. At the end of the day, the strength will be your relationships with each other. And those exist now and those will exist in the future. And just remembering that you all get through it together. But it is a challenge, like everybody has said.
Again, thank you all. Thank you for speaking to our UCF colleagues, for encouraging them. Just know, everybody, we're still working on getting more information out to you. I know sometimes it's a lot of information. Sometimes it may not feel like you're getting to find it all, but we're doing our best to make sure we connect with everybody. We have meetings with transition teams starting on Thursday, so we'll make sure we're connecting with them and that they understand the project and are getting information out to all of you. So thank you again.